And we're back. We are live. Hey, and welcome everyone. This is Saturday Morning Sages, and we are sitting here with the Sages and an extra guest here. Sebastian, he is a blogger and he writes a lot about sci-fi and pop culture and everything else that we're into. And hey, Sebastian, how are you doing?
Hey, John. I also write occasional articles for trekcore.com. That's another one of my gigs. Well, when we had conventions. But yeah, and my site is Musings of a Middle-Aged Geek at WordPress.com. You can usually find it in most Google searches. So anyway, that's my
Cool.
plug.
Awesome. Yeah. And then if you read it and you're watching something that's on TV, he does give you ample spoiler alerts, if I'm not
Oh yeah,
mistaken, because
yeah.
he doesn't hold any punches, right?
My columns are full of spoilers, so I have to do that with every column. It's just that is the way.
It is the way. It is the way.
I see what you did there.
And speaking of which, and we have Jason. And Jason, I know that you and I have been producing the comic picks by the Glick for a while.
Yeah, GlicksComicPicks.com. It's like for 12 years now, and still going strong after all these years.
Yep, and we've been, we've covered Fanime. That's another convention which we're hoping will continue eventually.
Cross your fingers for 2022, I think.
Yeah, we'll see how things roll.
Yeah.
But yeah. So, and then Myron is one of our core Saturday morning sages. So
Yeah.
how you doing today, Myron?
Oh, I'm doing good. I'm just a regular nerd who works to feed the habit.
Oh, aren't we all?
And he's got enough lightsabers. He doesn't need a sight for himself.
That's right. He's constructed his own lightsaber.
Ooh, you're a Jedi now, Myron. That's all you need is the ability to construct a lightsaber. Once you do that, you're all set.
He has more
well, Disney offers that for $200, so I've already gotten to that point. And
So are the staff at Disneyland all Jedi? No. I'm just if they play lightsabers. I'm just saying.
Well, they have a lot of different options you could take, but obviously I'm going to go with more of I went with the power or no the peace and justice look. That kind of core Jedi. Original trilogy look with my lightsaber. But then now with Disneyland being closed, it's hard to get those legacy lightsabers, so you have to resort to eBay or whatever means to build up that collection. But obviously Mandalorian has really fed into the merchandising bug for me this past season.
Hey, at least you're not collecting lightsabers like General Grievous, okay?
No, not in that dishonorable way. No.
I had to do the whole coughing thing. I'm sorry.
Yep, you have to. I forget how.
Anytime I had a cold or a cough after watching that movie, I would just go. It became sort of natural after a while.
Yep.
Anyway.
So we're gonna what we're gonna do is we're going to talk about the season finale for season 2, and that's chapter 16 by the book here. There is a book to talk about, but not yet. And then it's titled The Rescue. And then afterwards, I'd like to, kind of guide the discussion into like a season 2 recap. We can kind of compare it with season 1 and everything else. But let's go and jump into this, into The Rescue. Our hero is missing Grogu. Or call him Baby Yoda. I like. I mean, I or you could be imperial about it and call him the asset.
Forever. Sorry.
So I'd have to say, I think it was the last episode at the end of the tragedy, or is that when we see that Din sends that transmission to Moff Gideon?
Yes, that was the end of the tragedy when He means more to me than you'll ever know.
Yep, exactly.
Police word to me a little bit, you know.
Yep. So, any of initial thoughts on this episode? Do you think it was it's pretty good?
Powerful.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Generally
Power.
pretty solid overall.
Yeah.
Very, very fan servicey too, in a good way.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
And everyone knows what I mean, I'm sure. Spoiler alert, but yeah.
Oh yeah.
I kind of would have liked to have gone into this episode not knowing that there was like a cameo, because when I woke up on the Friday that it came out, there were all these articles like, how did the Mandalorian land that cameo? And I was like,
Oh,
huh.
yeah.
And you know what? I did wake up to that too, saying like this big cameo, but I made sure like to swipe away or not really delve into those type of articles, because I'm like, okay, we're gonna have a big character,
Yeah.
And they said major character be cameoed within this season finale, and there's so many big characters within the Star Wars lore at this point. They could have went with anybody, but with what they ended up with, who they ended up using, like my jaw just dropped by the very end. And I've told John this in conversation before, but this episode, I mean, this whole season, but this episode really re-solidified my hype of being a Star Wars fan again. I won't dive too deeply into nagging on the sequel trilogy as we've done already in the past, but not that it killed my fandom. It was just a missed opportunity for me. What Mandalorian season 2 has done is re-solidify like why it's fun to be a Star Wars fan, and
Yeah.
this series alone, I think, has justified why it's important to kind of stick with this format and kind of stick with what the fans want. Thus, why we're getting more projects in the future, whether it be on Disney Plus or maybe movies in this type of style. But we're going to be getting more projects that I think these creators are finally listening to the fan base. Like, this is what our audience really wants. And I thought this episode was very powerful. Especially like I didn't necessarily expect Grogu to be rescued. I thought we were going to be left with like some type of like super cliffhanger, but we were left in a cliffhanger in another way. And so yeah, I really dug this episode a lot.
So in the beginning of this episode, we see that Boba Fett. How many times? I mean, I love that. Boba Fett is chasing. There, and the crew is chasing down an Imperial shuttle with I forget
That scientist guy.
That scientist guy. That's what I forget the name.
Pershing. Dr. Pershing is the character's name is Dr. Pershing.
Yep.
Okay, glad one of us is paying attention.
Dr. Pershing, yeah, he and we get a little trivia once they chase him down and they're sitting in the cockpit. One of the pilots shoots the other one and holds him. It's like, hey, I got him here, and then he taunts Kara.
Yeah.
And we get a little clue into her past, right? That the rebel tear tattoo is in remembrance of Alderaan, where she comes from. And he taunts her by saying, like, I was there. I was like, oh.
I watched it blow up.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
had to make him extra evil to get us come up in a few seconds. But I just, first of all, taunting a woman as formidable as her, not a good idea. Just saying, But I do like how they referenced how they always reference things like Alderaan and all that, and it gives that rich, layered history that the original trilogy had when they alluded to things like the Clone Wars and all that. You got this is a much bigger universe, and the Mandalorian does that effortlessly, and I love how it does that. But speaking to Myron's point real quickly, he was saying that this made him excited to be a Star Wars fan again. Now I'm not as hostile towards the new trilogy as a lot of fans are. I like it for what it is. I don't expect it to be much more, but I do agree that the Mandalorian is quantifiably better in every way. In fact, I go so far to say that the Mandalorian is the best thing to come out of the Star Wars universe since the original trilogy. And I know that's a big one for a lot of people because there's Clone Wars, there's Rebels, but honestly, this show was everything a lot more than I could have hoped for when I heard they were doing a live action Star Wars show. I was thinking there's going to be budget restraints. They're gonna have to, it's not going to be as theatrical. It is every bit as theatrical as the movies. The action set pieces, the use of the LED wraparound screens and all that to shoot these things makes them a lot cheaper, and they can do stuff they couldn't do in the films. But
and when Disney wants to get someone for a specific role, they can get that person.
Oh yeah, they have Disney money. I mean, they can afford anybody. So there's that. But and that's the exciting thing, though. I mean, but the big reveal again, speaking to an earlier point, how John and everybody was saying how it was sort of spoiled for them when they woke up. I watched it 5:30 in the morning to write my column for it, and I was trying so hard not to tell Julia because Julia woke up after I did. She was set to watch it later that evening with me. She went on Twitter right away. It was ruined.
Oh.
It's like a big freaking picture of Luke Skywalker right there, and I'm like, oh,
Twitter ruins everything.
Of course, Twitter ruins everything. So there's that. So she got spoiled fairly early.
And just to comment on what you were saying, Sebastian, I think that while there are acknowledged, and I really want to talk about this episode, but I will talk about this at the very least, that the writing for this seems to go back. Let's think about this. Star Wars was literally started from an inspiration from a samurai drama and like westerns, and I think this literally goes back to the original formula in a lot of ways.
Oh, very much so. The original Star Wars was conceived as sort of a Kurosawa spin on westerns, which Kurosawa films were. They took a lot of Western motifs. Kurosawa ran in his own way, and then it's funny, like Magnificent Seven, for example. It's like the original, the Seven Samurai was inspired by American westerns from the 30s and 40s. Kurosawa redid it with Samurai, and then it was redone again a few years later as Magnificent Seven in Hollywood. I think the Mandalorian kind of has that feel to it. It takes that Eastern Western influence that the original trilogy had, that the later movies, the prequels, kind of lost sight of, and it's brought all that back to the fore again. And I really like how it's done that so well. You'd think after all the clutter of the cartoons and all the prequels, the sequels, all that, all that would get lost. But the writers and producers of The Mandalorian just bring it back so well. It's like you could watch this right after the original trilogy and you're fine.
Yes.
You don't have to even know who Bo-Katan is because you find out immediately. She's the heiress to Mandalore, this and that, and
I don't know what that writing technique is, but where they pretty much add the definition of who that person is through the dialogue. But they do that. They do that in here, and they do it fine. If you never heard of Bo-Katan or Ahsoka Tano, you pretty much have enough. I mean, you don't have all of the rest of the world building that she may have come from or anything else, but you get a couple of things that you need.
And I think that's important because I talked to other friends who are consider themselves Star Wars fans as well, and they always kind of like harp on the fact that especially with the sequel trilogy and some of these other materials, like I shouldn't have to rely on a cartoon series or a comic book or a video game to elaborate on these characters and tell me that. I want to watch a movie and know the information that it's trying to present and know the story that it's trying to present in these characters and feel satisfied with the story that it's told without having to rely on other mediums. And so I agree with you on that point because I am familiar with Clone Wars and Rebels, and I've been exposed to Bo-Katan and to Ahsoka Tano. So my hypeness for these characters in a live action show was a little bit greater, but for others that might not have gotten that deep into the Clone Wars series or the Rebels series, they're not going to know who these characters are, but then get this firsthand exposure and get enough information on who they are and possibly build an interest to where this character is in other materials. I want to go see that other material now.
Yeah. Well, and my thing is I've watched a few episodes of Clone Wars. I watched the last few episodes of the series. Those were great. I loved Rebels. Rebels, I've watched all 4 seasons of. I really, really dug that show. That was recommended to me by my friend Nick, and he was just like, "Forget Clone Wars, watch this one." And I took his advice, and it was good advice. I tried Clone Wars over the years here and there, but it kind of lost me. It never. I watched the 2008 movie that was horrible, but the series just didn't really grab me. The last few episodes did, but the rest of it not so much. So I don't have as much of the inner mythology whatnot as other fans. And again, I grew up with Star Wars. I mean, I was 10 years old when the first movie came out. That's how ancient I am. But so for me, I mean, Star Wars is literally something I grew up with. But I again, as I got older, the 2000s came along and the cartoons. It just seemed like this deluge that I couldn't keep up with. There was too much Star Wars. There was the expanded universe. There were all the books, the comics, and I tried to kind of graze them now and then, just like read a book here and there. I read the Heir to the Empire trilogy by Timothy Zahn. I liked all that. It was okay, but none of it really struck me as like real core Star Wars. The prequels came along, and that kind of diluted the brand a bit for me. So I guess I went from being a hardcore fan as a kid to sort of lapsing into a semi-casual fan as an adult. But Mandalorian has took me back to the hardcore feeling I had as a kid, and that's something Myron pointed out much more eloquently than I am right now. But it brought me back to the reasons why I love Star Wars, why Star Wars was so such a drug as a kid, and it was such a powerful thing. And Mandalorian has that power that I haven't seen since the original trilogy. Not the sequel trilogy. I'm not so hard on that one. I like it for what it is, and I think they've had a lot of things kind of hobbling that series, like Carrie Fisher's passing, and this and that and whatever. But it's okay. It's entertaining enough, and it on a big screen, it's very entertaining, of course. But Mandalorian is just again, it brings back the core Eastern Western style of that whole Kurosawa meets John Ford kind of vibe. And it does remind you why you love this series so much.
And I think the writers have just on that also, like, and this is another one of my points. I'm just reiterating it, but if they've made it accessible. I mean, you don't have to sit there and go, I didn't read all of these things about all these different bases or what a crate dragon is. But you pretty much it's self-explanatory, and that's pretty good. You know what sand people are. I mean, yeah. You also know who Boba Fett is. I mean, you don't have to have an in-depth. And by the way, I'll have to say that Boba Fett really didn't have a lot of depth. Okay, we knew a few things. If you're just watching him from the movie standpoint, there's not a lot to say.
No, and a mystery in a cool outfit.
He's probably had collectively within the original trilogy, 3, maybe 5 lines, between there.
Yeah.
He's worth a lot. He's worth a lot to me alive.
Yeah, he's no good to me dead. And that's all I can remember.
And here's how insignificant it was. I mean, they redubbed his lines in the new editions to match to match the what's his name, the actor who played
Aquaman's father.
Yeah, Aquaman's father, right?
Aquaman's father, yes.
And I just sat there and I listened to a comparison. Somebody actually just cobbled this together on YouTube, and I was sitting there listening to him, going like, "Okay, I wouldn't even notice the difference. It's barely even noticeable on those few lines that he speaks."
Well, I noticed a difference only because the original actor Jason Wingreen, I was familiar with a lot of his work. He was a character actor on TV a lot during the 60s and 70s. He did Twilight Zone. He did All in the Family. He played the bartender. He was like, "Hey, Arch," that kind of guy. And so when he first did Boba Fett, but he had that kind of "as you wish," and then later, Tamura Morrison he had that Kiwi thing, with the "as you wish," maybe more nasal, like that kind of thing. And it was close enough. I mean, who really cares, right?
Yeah, close enough. And like I didn't, and Timor Morrison. I mean, he is a New Zealander, right? Is that's where he's
Yeah.
from? Pacific Islander essentially. So, but yeah, listening to it, I'm like, okay, that's fine for me. It works fine, But what I do like, is we do see him, working with with our current heroes, if you will, and particularly in this episode and the last episode as well. Actually, we see him first in
At the end of the first episode.
Wait a minute. Oh, you mean Mandalorian? Yeah, you're right. He's after the first episode. He has that brief blink and you'll miss him moment in the desert.
Yeah.
It doesn't show up again until episode 6.
Yep.
That's the tragedy, right? And that's when he redons his armor and
and ruins a lot of Stormtroopers' day.
Yeah. Oh, in an incredible way.
He made a lot. He made a lot of widows that day.
Yeah.
Didn't that? Real quickly though, didn't that moment for a lot of people who were disappointed by Boba Fett from the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy, that single moment in what was it? The tragedy that redeemed the character after 30 odd years. I felt Boba Fett finally came to fruition in that episode.
Mm-hmm.
That single half-hour TV episode again brought the character like now he finally makes sense. Why all this fan adoration? When I was a kid, I remember sending away for the Boba Fett Kenner action figure.
Mm-hmm.
You had to get like umpteen proofs of purchase for Star Wars figures, and you mailed it in.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the mail, it came in a little bubble wrap, whatever. And it was like, oh, Boba Fett's going to be great. He's going to be awesome. We saw The Empire Strikes Back a year later in Hollywood, the best possible way to see it at the Egyptian Theater. And it was like, that's all? That's all he does? I come home, I look at this figure, I'm like, the hell? And it just, but, and then Return of the Jedi, he dies like a red shirt,
Yep.
His rocket misfires, and he flies into the pit.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the character. And all I could think was all that hype, all that build-up. I remember going to a local mall where they had two cosplayers dressed as Vader and Boba Fett. This was in like spring of '79. And they were hyping the hell out of Boba Fett, saying, oh, the new mystery character from the Star Wars sequel, blah, blah, blah. And we were like, ooh, great. He's going to be like the new Darth Vader or whatnot. No, he's kind of nothing. But in this one episode, 37 or 38 years later, the character was finally redeemed.
Mm-hmm.
And you saw why this character was so cool.
Yep.
And I loved it. Mandalorian did that single-handedly in 1/2 hour. It redeemed the character.
Yep. So, in the rescue, and what we were talking about, he's chasing him in Slave One. He's chasing the, after they've commandeered the shuttle. And there's that part there where Moff Gideon's like, launch the fighters, and I almost got this Battlestar Galactica vibe.
I said this in my blog. The launch tube remind me of Battlestar Galactica
because it was like this launch tube thing, And by the way, it also, gives you a sense of scale of Moff Gideon's ship. It's not very big. You think of it in terms of like how it looked against the regular Star Destroyer in the original in the middle trilogy, I guess we'll call it that. But then you see the TIE fighter launching out of it, and it's like, okay, it's barely bigger than the launch tube. I mean, it's like,
that's because apparently all the Star Destroyers were on Exegol like this whole time.
No, those are different. Those are different.
There's so about the launch tube before I forget. Did anyone else find it was kind of interesting that you had red-eyed robots and launch tubes in the episode that had Cara and Bo-Katan, aka Cara Thrace?
Yeah.
I was like, there was a lot of BSG connection in that last episode. A lot of Battlestar Galactica vibe going on. You had Cara Thrace meeting Cara Dune. You had launch tubes aboard launching the TIE fighters, and you had red-eyed rampaging robots. I was like, this is
coincidence. I think not. It's not a coincidence.
I was thinking, did anyone else catch that? The thing about the Cylons, or the Cylons,
Dark Troopers.
Dark Troopers.
Yeah, they also look to me like the robots from the black hole, those little red-eyed sentry robots. Remember the ones that with the kind of duck-billed faces, and they kind of remind me of those for some reason. The way they walked with that rigid, kind of. Anyway, but that's the observation.
When I first saw them, and we saw them in that episode. What was it? Oh, in the tragedy. That's when that's when you really see them, because they kidnapped Grogu from the Jedi Stone.
Yeah, I mean, like you spend a whole episode showing us, why the stormtroopers are such chumps, and then you think, oh well, here's their replacement. Here's
Droids.
Bigger and better stormtrooper.
Droids. But then what was and I know we talked about things about this before, but what I was thinking the whole time I saw them, I'm like, why am I getting a flashback from Age of Ultron? I'm just saying, all right, because I'm like, all right, maybe it's a Disney connection. I don't know.
It's just all like robots have to fly like that.
That's right.
It was whole.
But I do want to say that I think that they managed the Dark Troopers pretty well in in the rescue, because I mean, like, we got to see just how strong one is alone. It's like when he's taking on Mando at that one point.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And also, and even at the same time, when they managed to flush him out the airlock, you kind of think, oh, okay, well that's they're kind of like disposed of pretty well out there. But then they come back, and you're kind of like, oh, so everyone else, man, they're kind of screwed right there. It's like it's gonna take something really special to get them out of that.
Yeah, I'm a Star Trek veteran. I know that you flush Borg out in space, they're okay.
And I love that sense of urgency, like, within that episode too, because it's like, man, dude, like, Din had problems with one, and other being swarmed upon, and they're gonna be what's gonna happen now? How are they gonna escape this situation? And then, of course, once we see that X-wing pop up, that's when it's like, okay, there's back like a lone X-wing, like, who's gonna, like, ooh, goody, like, we're saved, like, sarcastically. But
Right.
Until you think about, like, well, wait a second, there's gonna be like a big Star Wars cameo. It's like in this episode, and there's one person flying the X-wing. Ooh, I got a pretty good idea who's in that X-wing.
yeah,
It's got to be Wedge, man. Totally Wedge.
Pigs, he came back.
Well,
Good old Jack Porkins back from the dead.
there's a scene where this mysterious hooded figure is fighting them, fighting the Dark Troopers, and essentially you see the glove and the lightsaber, and that's pretty much it.
Well, for me, like, it was one of those, like, this is too good to be true kind of moments, because, like, yeah, we see the X-wing land, and when they ask, like, who's on board, there's no answer. So obviously I'm like, and of course, because of Grogu's reaction, I'm like, okay, it's some kind of Jedi. Maybe it's Ahsoka coming up to help. And then, like you said, you see the dark cloak and a green lightsaber. You're like, no way, dude. Like,
and then the question becomes, like, wait a second. So did they recast him, or did they de-age him?
And that's what I thought too, because I think after the sequel trilogy, I thought Mark Hamill was, like, done participating in Star Wars, like, period. But
in the media, that he was kind of through with it.
Yeah, and so, like, as the character starts progressing to the cockpit, into, like, the main cockpit, I was just in my mind thinking, like, did they just get a great, like, look-alike or stunt double to play Luke? And sure enough, when they pull the hood over, like, we see that de-aging technology that of course they've been using in the past few movies. But I think the technology has gotten a lot better, because, I mean, as I pause in certain sequences, I don't know if it's maybe because of the lighting and the darkness, but he is a believable Luke. And if you think back to movies like Tron Legacy, or even
wasn't as good. Yeah.
What was Rogue One? Rogue One, like Tron Legacy, yeah, it wasn't as great, but I mean, that was kind of like one of the firsts we see of that technology, and then like by Rogue One, it's like okay, like it looks more like video game CG graphics, but they're kind of doing it a little bit better. But with this, like I had to really look and really see like wow, they did a really great job with it. Like the only flaw I see is like when he's speaking, you can kind of see like the kind of the fakeness of his mouth movement. But
Yeah.
other than that, I think with the lighting and the shading, like the texture looked good. Really looked like a good render of like younger Luke. And
Well, the
so
double matched his proportions like from the original trilogy exactly.
yeah,
So
for sure. And so
that was like a perfect match for the body double. And there was a shot where you saw the side of the body double's head. For some
Mhm.
reason, I could tell that was not Mark Hamill's head. But I mean, the body double again was so close.
Agree.
But I agree with Myron's point too that when he spoke, the only time it shattered the illusion was when he spoke. Because
yes.
they also de-aged his voice, and his voice sounded a little bit. Again, you have to watch it with a real microscope to get all the little. Again, when you watch it in episode in story, it works perfectly well. But
Agreed.
if you put it under the microscope and kind of like, the same thing with Rogue One, Leia had one word of dialogue, hope, and that was it. Yeah, on the big screen she looked a little bit strange, but if you watch it like on a 42-inch TV set, who cares, right? But and I thought Peter Cushing in Rogue One too, same problem. If you see a still image of him, he looks fine, but it's something with the movement that is it just they can never quite get the movement exactly lifelike. I don't know what it is, the lip movement, the way
The
people
physicality.
yeah, I mean, if you just still frame the image, it looks terrific. But it's with the movement that it loses something. And but again, for as fleetingly as you saw Luke in this story, I could easily buy that was Luke Skywalker back to rescue Grogu, Baby Yoda. I'm sorry, for me he's always Baby Yoda. But I'm just gonna, that's gonna go to the grave with me. But
No problem.
but I as fleetingly as you saw it, it worked, and it worked in story very well because who else would answer that call? Luke Skywalker, the guy who's rebuilding the Jedi.
Mhm.
I'm
So-
like, when he's sitting on the, in the previous, though, actually 2 episodes before this episode, when Grogu's sitting on the stone, Baby Yoda sitting on the stone, you're like, okay, this is a pretty powerful focal point. Let me think here. If it's, if Luke
How many
doesn't-
Jedi are out
if-
there that could really logically respond to this call?
if Luke doesn't get this call, then what does that say about him? I mean, like, that's what I was thinking. I'm going like, all right, because there's not many of them left.
right.
But man, like, he's got to be one of the most powerful ones out there.
Well,
So,
it's funny that you say that. Like, yeah, there's not quote unquote many of them left, but at the same time, like with these other stories, we're being exposed to Order 66 survivors or some type of talented Jedi like out there still alive. But at this point, Luke is like the quote unquote like Yoda now. He's the supreme Jedi master, and so you would presume like yeah, you would hope that he would be the one to answer the call. But let's face it, like this takes place after, Return of the Jedi and Mark Hamill, no disrespect, Mr. Hamill, but he's not at the age range Luke would be during this time frame. So it's like, how are they gonna do it? So it was thoroughly surprising. Like they did add the character Luke in here to answer the call, and they did execute a way to present Mark Hamill as he would be or Luke Skywalker as he would be age wise within this point in time. And so it makes me wonder. I mean, let's face it, like each and every day, each and every year, technology and artistic techniques are just getting better and better. Like, sidetrack a little bit. Look at how Monsters Inc. introduced like hair physics into CG animation, and let's look at like hair physics and CG animation today. As we mentioned with this de-aging technology, look at how it was introduced into Tron Legacy back then, and look at how it is now. And let's face it, let's say 3-4 years from now, we could possibly have like a quote unquote, Luke Skywalker, Academy series, or they'll present it in another manner, like an animated series or something. But the fact of the matter is,
An animated
they're giving us the Luke that we want.
Right. See, I was more surprised that the producers and directors had the audacity to do it. It was not so much to me that Luke Skywalker answers the call. It was like, oh my God, they brought Luke back.
Yeah.
That was a big surprise for me. They actually had the audacity and the confidence to do that. Bring like the major character from the original trilogy into this TV show. That was a huge leap. I was thinking it might have been like Ezra Bridger, maybe.
Yeah.
Or someone like that, because and it'd be a character I'd love to see in live action someday. Mandalorian could easily bring him back as well, because he's not dead and he survived Rebels clearly. So there's that. But I was just surprised the audacity. They brought back Luke freaking Skywalker. That to me was bold. And even if the CGI rendering wasn't like 100% perfect, I salute the audacity of it, and I think I like that as much as anything.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. It's just it's kind of crazy. I wouldn't have expected it, but they did it. And now it kind of opens the door for them to tell other stories. So we've got if you think about what is it?
Also, I want to say that it's kind of. I also want to say that it's kind of a sign that I think the Mandalorian kind of like earned this thing. It started off just by telling its own stories on its own terms, and just like it proved that it can do that. That it doesn't need to bring in like a big name like Luke in order to like help it succeed. It's like so that when they finally do that, it's like it kind of feels like like the series can like interact with like a key part of the mythos, but not have to like really fundamentally change it, or just like feel like it's using it as a crutch. So,
yep,
I agree with that.
Yep. So, and I mean, we're this is really Din and Grogu's story. Okay, Baby Yoda. It's really their story, and the parting shots, of course, were sad, and I mean, if you didn't tear up, and that's on you. You're just an insensitive person. I'm just kidding. It's
I got theories about that where that's going.
It's but no, we've got another. That's something I was dead set on them. Extending the crisis to as a cliffhanger. Really, I mean, and we didn't get that.
They could have. They could have done that very easily.
Yeah,
and that's honestly that's kind of what I expected with leaving on that cliffhanger, and you're just like, crap, I gotta wait like a whole year to start jumping back into this adventure again. But I kind of like what they did here, because we already know that they're doing seasons 3 and 4 back to back, and so
good idea.
The where the story plans on going, like I'm curious as to how Din and Grogu will reunite, and how this dynamic is going to change. Like, is he going to come back like an asshole teenager, like teenage Groot?
Nah.
So it's like it's kind of fun to think of where Grogu's gonna go, because obviously either Grogu is the first student to link to Luke's new Jedi Academy school, or Luke has already established this academy and just gained another student. So hopefully we'll get a little bit more in depth to how Grogu's going to grow as a Jedi. And
here's the thing, though, if he's part of that academy, was Grogu killed in the depicted in Last Jedi? The Flash.
Everyone, go and grab your Last Jedi on Blu-rays and start doing frame by frame of those scenes. Like, see me like green ears sticking out of the rubble, then I got some bad news for you.
Now,
that's a good point.
Perhaps Mando. I keep calling him Mando. I know he's Din Djarin, and I just call him
Mando.
Mando.
Now, Mando, maybe he missed him so much he came back and rescued him or took him away from the school. Maybe he thought that the Jedi's techniques were harming the old lad or something, and maybe he comes and rescues him before that fate.
So I had this thing.
I can kind of see that happening, but also the thing is, like, I think that Amando's got some business to take care of before he gets back to Grogu. Because remember, he's got the dark saber now.
Yeah.
Well, but here's the thing. To be honest, okay, the Mandalorian thing was cool. I liked it in Rebels, and I saw some of it in Clone Wars as well. It was kind of neat. But I don't want season 3 to be all about reclaiming Mandalore's glory. To be honest, that's not really a story. For me, the emotional core of this show is really the father-son relationship between Mando and Baby Yoda. It's kind of like what's that old 1970s Bill Bixby show, Courtship of Eddie's Father. It's that, but with like an alien and a guy in a mask. It's that show. It's a father bonding with his little son. And that's the core of it. You take that away, and the emotional core of the show is kind of gone. Unless, now obviously I think you guys were right. He's going to get back to Baby Yoda eventually somehow, but in the meantime, are we just going to see reclaiming Mandalore's throne? Because
No, I'll go out on the record on it and say no, that's not we're going to see. I think there's some elements there, and they've proven that they can shoot at least one episode without Baby Yoda in it. So, however, there's actually more than that, but there was one specifically where you did not see him at all. But I would say that my theory is on this is that we're dropped a couple of hints about, especially I think from Ahsoka Tano, like where she says that he's disguised his ability, or he's hidden his ability. So I think that's going to be a primary issue. I also another thing that's identified in that same episode is the bond between Mando and Baby Yoda. To use your term,
and we know,
and I think that's it. I think what we may see is that this little this little guy is powerful. He's throwing in the last episode he's throwing stormtroopers around like rag dolls.
Right.
She had mentioned, well, maybe it's better if if just to let his abilities fade, and I'm like, oh man, that's a possibility. The bond is stronger. I'm sorry, go on ahead, Sebastian.
No, the bond corrupted him. His bond with Mando corrupted him for Jedi training, perhaps. Maybe that's why he wants to come and take him away. Maybe in season 2 or season 3 he gets a call saying, "Hey, your kid's not working out. Come pick him up."
It's like the daycare. It's like, yeah, he's beating up all the other
kids. Your kids and force choking the other students. Get them out of here.
Choking them and stealing all of their cookies.
I just think Mando gets a call from Luke Skywalker. Yeah, your son, he's just not cut out to be a Jedi. Not working up to our standards. We're having a little bit of communicating.
And see, and that's the most important factor right there is the emotional bond, because unfortunately Jedis are kind of trained to let go of attachments and kind of be focused on the practice. And so like you said, like both of you guys said, there's that father son kind of bond with Grogu, and how is this going to affect his training, and is this actually going to add to Luke's jadedness of teaching students? Because obviously from the sequel trilogy we know it was more so Ben Solo, but there just comes a point where he just kind of gives up on the Jedi Order as a whole, and I think possibly it's due to it's due to emotion and it's due to feelings. Because if you look at Anakin Skywalker too, that's another character who was deeply powerful and great with the Force, but he had emotional attachments to his mother and of course Padme, and it just left him on a dark path. And so there's almost that regret of certain masters or certain teachers, oh, I failed this student, or I didn't do right by this student. But honestly, you guys need to learn how to incorporate, especially if you're training force sensitive humans, you need to know how to incorporate emotional training in your Jedi teachings. You can't just cut that out of our being, or any living beings, nature. And so I think that was kind of the downfall of the Jedi Order in some type of aspect, where like, oh, you have too much tide, too much emotion, you're not ready, or you're not like, going to be a master. They're going to go find nurturing from somewhere else where, Anakin went with, Palpatine. And of course, let's say Grogu, just decides to go back with Mando and learn his powers on his own. They're going to find some way to get that type of um, uh, nourishment within their training. And Sebastian, you who are familiar with Rebels too, I mean, Ezra kind of went through the same thing, and he was being fought over by two masters,
Darth Maul and
Darth Maul, yeah,
right.
Kanan Jarrus and Darth Maul. But we also see that Ezra does have a good head on his shoulders and know what's right, to where like he has talents in both the light and the dark, but he didn't do anything like, crazy or stupid,
Yeah.
but obviously it depends on that person. So it'll be interesting to see how, if this is Luke's like first student, how training a powerful Jedi with strong emotion is going to affect his will or ability as a teacher.
Well, I never found the whole Jedi thing with don't form bonds with people. It's so bizarre, because wouldn't that kind of make you a sociopath if you didn't bond with anybody and you had to exclude all forms of contact or friendship or intimacy?
Yeah, that kind of never made sense to me either.
Wait, where was that established? Was that established like in the prequel trilogy?
The prequel,
yeah, more so in the prequel trilogy.
And so in a lot of ways, like, I think that reflects like the Jedi Order of the time, though, and that may not necessarily be like, because you had like and now this is like kind of delving into like the whole Jedi like and how they interact with the Force, but Qui-Gon, for example, wasn't he really. He was a part of the Jedi Order, but he really didn't agree with them on several things. If I'm not,
he was more of a he was more of a radical at that
right.
time.
So where maybe they valued those, the other, he had disagreement with it, and there was definitely corruption, in the Jedi Order at that point. Corruption in the sense that they thought that they were more powerful and couldn't be defeated. I mean, their arrogance, their hubris brought them down in a way.
I had another problem too with. Now this is kind of related / unrelated. The episode called "The Siege." Where they had to get rid of that Imperial stronghold on Navarro.
Yeah.
Here's the deal. When they blew up the lab, they found evidence that they were mining. They wanted to mine Baby Yoda for his M count.
Yeah.
I always thought they could undo midichlorians from the Star Wars trilogy with a single line of dialogue. All you need to hear is Luke Skywalker or some character say, talking about the fall of the Jedi, what caused the fall. You have them say, in our arrogance, we believed the Force was a thing of blood. We believed it came from midichlorians. We were wrong. Just a line as simple as that could midichlorians. And I think the funny thing is that they mined Baby Yoda already. They already got his midichlorians by the time of the rescue. When Moff Gideon taunts him, saying, "Oh, he's useless to us now. You can have him." We got his midichlorians. But apparently those midichlorians didn't work, because if they were using them to make Palpatine clones, which I'm assuming that was the creatures in the test tubes we saw on Navarro. They were like the early Palpatine prototypes, the early Snopes, or whatever you want to call them. Now, if that's true, then the midichlorian thing didn't work, because the Force is more than that. It's more of I'm an atheist saying this, but I mean, it's this deeper spiritual thing, between all living matter in the universe, etc. It's not just how many bugs you have in your blood. I mean, come on. I mean,
Yoda, you seek Yoda. Where he talks about the Force surrounds us
and binds us.
Like it's not just like midichlorians. I think it's and from a I guess that was maybe one way of pragmatically like trying to explain the Force. I think it's a bad like mistake, honestly, to try to do that.
But here's another question for you guys. So, I mean, if we're talking about like, even though like it was featured in like a Star Wars movie, it's like I was like, how mainstream a concept is midichlorians within Star Wars anyway? I mean, it's like if you just brought it up to like I don't know, like a random person who saw The Force Awakens, would they even know what you're talking about?
No,
Not necessarily. I mean, my only context to it was episode 1, and I think possibly like it was hinted again in episode 2, like referring to Anakin.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's like, I mean, like, I guess at this point, like, trying to like explain away midichlorians would probably like wouldn't it be like trying to address a problem that everyone's trying to forget, has already like conveniently forgotten exists and all.
But then the Mandalorian brought it back with the whole
Yeah.
thing. So
Mm.
clearly,
Yeah.
it's still a part of the universe. It's still a part of the lore. But I'm thinking there's going to be a point where they're just going to retcon it away and say, we thought we knew everything we knew about the Force back then. We were wrong. It's not.
Which is a good explanation in and of itself too.
It could just be. It could be as simple as that. You don't have to overwrite it or overthink it. You just say, like Luke Skywalker retconned his bad attitude from The Last Jedi by just telling his Force self told Rey, I was wrong. That simple line can undo. And I know people love Last Jedi. That's fine. It wasn't one of my favorites, but long story short, you can retcon away something as dumb as midichlorians the same way you retconned into it. All you gotta say is just, we thought we understood the Force, that for thousands of years the Jedi thought they understood the Force, but came through the blood. We were wrong.
And you know what? Let's I'll take the creative mental gymnastics on this one, Sebastian. I'll say that that is the terminology that the Empire uses, and maybe they don't really understand it either.
And that's why they keep failing with their clones.
Yeah, exactly. Like they keep failing at it because they're seeing it from a perspective that's not true. And maybe that explanation will come out, in the next season or something. They got some wiggle room here to play around with that a bit. No, I don't like it, but the only people I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, the only people who are really talking about it in that is the recording. And where they're talking like, yeah, we harvested this thing, and we made these other things, and we tried to put these things in this other thing to make it more powerful or make a clone. And I don't know, maybe it doesn't really work. So, and maybe that explanation will come through. It's only a part of the equation. Evidently, it may be. There may be some hints in that. However,
putting it up for season 3, they're probably going to undo the whole midichlorian thing by explaining that the clones didn't take, because midichlorians are not the end all of the Force.
I mean, after all, why wouldn't you just, give a little bit of your clone troopers a bit of the, let's give them a booster of midichlorians.
Yes, right. I mean, if it's as simple as midichlorians, couldn't you just put in a hypo and give it to everybody?
Exactly.
And then just have to practice yoga for 10 minutes. I mean, come on.
It's not like, huh?
I say you're talking about making a drug out of it.
Yeah. Well, it's not,
if they're going to boil it down to that.
It's not like triple blood or anything. So, I mean, there's some, it's like based on what Moff Gideon says, there's some implications. We're going to see some of that when it comes to Baby Yoda, Grogu. But one thing I'd like to kind of focus on this discussion is like Din's character arc, or Mando's character arc. Okay. And what I find fascinating about it in this whole season is that we learned some really key things about him, and about how he was a foundling, and we saw this in the last season where he would not remove his helmet for anything. And even at the end, IG-11 has he's like, I've got to heal you. I'm not a living thing, so I don't count. In this season, we see him. What's the first time that we see Mando take off his helmet? Is what is it? Is it when they go into the fortress here?
Yes.
Yep.
It's the episode just before the season finale, right?
What was that called? I can't remember.
He takes it off for Grogu. In other words, to go on this mission to find his location and rescue him.
I think that when we see the heiress, where he meets Bo-Katan for the first time. We actually, and then that
We find out that he's a Mandalorian fundamentalist.
right. We exactly.
Child of the Watch, we called him.
I'm sorry. Say that again.
A child of the Watch, which is
Child
basically,
of the Watch. Mm-hmm.
which is kind of like the Mandalorian ISIS or whatnot. That kind of like extremist group.
Mm-hmm.
They're
Right.
very
Exactly.
and so that's what Mando was. He's like Jason said, he's a fundamentalist.
Yep.
Oh,
and there was something to it, and I'll be honest with you. When I saw, when we saw kind of the ritualistic nature of it in the last season, especially when he meets the armor, when he talks to the armor, and and they're sitting there and they're all talking about this is the way, which is I think a pretty cool little phrase, but still we get this real almost cultish vibe off of it, and you're like, is this what Mandalorians are? They're all like this big cult.
Oh, this is just your crazy science fiction warrior cult nonsense. It's fine. And then when you meet Bo-Katan and her crew, and you think like, wow, like there's like some real like ideological divides within Mandalorian culture, aren't there?
Yep.
I like that though. I like that there are ideological divides in Mandalorian culture because it makes the culture that much more layered and interesting.
Oh yeah, and it also sets up that great moment at the end when with the issue with the Darksaber, because now who's being the fundamentalist? Because I mean, it's like if
I had a big problem with the Darksaber moment. Thanks for bringing that up though, but I gotta address this quick while it's on my mind. Where she refuses to take it from Mando because she didn't earn it in combat. Okay, correct me if I'm wrong. You guys have all seen Rebels, right?
Yes,
I've seen the first season.
Didn't Sabine Wren just hand it to her and she took it?
Yes, from the witches.
So why the hell is she putting up this kind of fuss and going all fundamentalist right now? That's the one part of the rescue that didn't sit with me, was that why Bo-Katan was suddenly being this fundamentalist. I'm like, I don't get it. Why won't she just take it? He forfeited. He didn't want anything to do with it. He's like, here, take it. I don't want it. But she becomes a fundy. And I'm like, why did this happen?
Maybe she was putting on a strong face in front of Gideon.
No,
like she
didn't care.
Now, here's something interesting, and it was hinted at even at the end of last season, that Moff Gideon knows a hell of a lot about the Mandalorians and the culture. I mean, like he calls them all out by name, but he does understand a lot of this, and there's no explanation for it from my perspective. I'm going like, okay. Yeah, what it sounds like a plot contrivance, like it's just thrown in there just to up the ante. Now we have a different conflict, right?
It felt like artificial drama to me. Like it didn't need to be there, but they put it there so she couldn't take it that easily. And come on, Sabine Wren she took it from the witches and she just handed it to her. She said, "Here, take it."
But if I remember correctly, wasn't Sabine kind of like excommunicated, or she like left the Mandalorian kind of culture? Like she wasn't.
She didn't wear her mask all the time either.
Yeah, so maybe when it comes to that kind of context, it's kind of like she's maybe not so hard up on the rules as
nitpicking, right?
I mean, yeah.
It is. I have to say that this is going to be an interesting thing, but I agree. I think it's just a contrivance they've thrown in. I don't know how it's going to work out, honestly. But yeah, I agree.
I mean,
there's more to make sense, honestly.
There's more stories to tell, because I mean, what you just explained, John, about Moff Gideon, always made me believe that. Or at least in my theory, like he is, I theorize he's Mandalorian in some sort of way.
Oh,
that's what I've always theorized. Like he was one of the ones, like, in order to make Mandalore great, we need to side with the Empire and fall in line. That's why he knows so much about the lore, and why he was the one who founded the Darksaber in the first place. Not necessarily like, all right, I need to get this item in order to play these people or play Bo-Katan. Like, obviously he knows about the culture, the practices, and the rules. So I've always theorized that he was Mandalorian.
point.
Or maybe he's just like the most toxic Mandalorian fanboy in the whole galaxy.
That's a possibility too, because I mean, like Boba Fett's not a real Mandalorian, so to speak, but you know,
even with Django was also a foundling, wasn't he?
Django was a foundling. Yep.
So,
Yes.
and Boba was like a clone of a foundling, so he's like less than.
I'll have to say, Sebastian, in this episode of The Rescue, like the part where they're fighting and he's like, and what does she say? She's like, I've heard your voice many times.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
And, like insults him, like, oh, your father, you're from a Bacta tank. And I'm just going like, whoa.
Yeah, that was kind of. That was kind of like a nerd jab. Like when I heard her say that, I was like, "Ooh," like you're not unique. I've heard your voices like thousands of times, referring to the clone troopers. But
I gotta say, I loved how they used their rocket packs in bar fighting. That was pretty novel.
Yeah.
Pretty novel. Using a rocket pack in a bar fight, I would have never thought of that. I thought, okay, that was brilliant fight choreography, if nothing else.
Mm-hmm.
I think. Oh yeah, I loved it. I thought that was really neat. And I do like all of this world building that's happening with the Mandalorians, and then we find out all of these things, And by the way, and part of my original point is that Mando Din like softens his position. Let's face it. By the end of this, he definitely he takes his helmet off.
Yeah.
So that Grogu can like see his real face. Although I think he kind of saw underneath it when he was eating that one time in the on his ship. Oh,
crap. Yeah. He would kind of like he would kind of like lift his helmet up a little bit to expose his mouth to where he could eat. Yeah.
Yeah.
I always took the mask as being a sign of invulnerability. The Mandalorians have a fierce need to remain invulnerable, and when you remove that mask, to them it's like being naked.
Yeah.
I mean, the funny thing is that one episode, I keep forgetting the name, with Bill Burr, the one where they went to the Imperial Stronghold. What was it called?
Oh, The Tragedy. Is it the No, The Believer.
The Believer. Thank you. In that episode, when Mando has to take his helmet off to go into that mess hall, he looks dazed, and I don't mean just because he's afraid of being found out by Imperials, but he looks like how one of us would look if you walked into a room naked suddenly, and you're like, oh crap! And he has this look on his face, and this is all Pedro Pascal's amazing acting. The guy can act through armor or in the flesh. He's a wonderful actor, but he looks dazed, and he looks like he's vulnerable, almost like a little child.
Yeah,
he has this weird kind of vulnerability on his face.
Yeah, I felt uncomfortable for him.
Yeah, it is. It's like being nude, like one of us being nude,
Yeah.
I know.
Now here's a thought, and I'm just going to say this. The reason why he would even entertain taking the helmet off is because he cares about the kid so much.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Right.
Like he wouldn't have thought about doing this before, right? I mean, that's the thought I've had in my mind. It's like he cares enough about this kid to literally expose himself in front of Imperials of all people,
I mean, look at going back to what you said earlier. Like, if you didn't shed a tear by the end of this episode, you have no heart. I mean, the moment he takes his helmet off, you could look into his eyes and just kind of see that sadness, like of letting go. And it's what you just said. It's that bond and that love that he's developed for the kid, over these past 2 seasons. And it was very touching too to see the little puppet Grogu kind of like cradle the side of his face, and you're like, "Oh, dude!" Like he's letting his son go, and then look at what Luke said to him too. Like, when Din was like, "All right, here's your master, go," and then Luke told him to the effect of like, "He's waiting for your permission," or he's like waiting for your blessing. And
said, "Yeah, he's waiting for permission."
Yeah, and so it was just kind of like. Just hearing that too, you're like, oh man, like how are these guys going to reunite like in the seasons moving forward? Like the separation right now is sad, and I can see like Disney losing some product because Grogu's going to be out of the picture. But no, keep him. His momentum is high right now. But yeah, it was like a gut wrenching moment where like obviously like he's willing to put aside his principles or put aside anything for the love and regard of this child.
Yeah, I like Din's character arc. I really do. I think that, and here's, outside of, him doing these little quests and whatnot, here's something that Star Wars kind of has as its core is family. And it's a weird thing to say, maybe on the surface, but when you think of the original trilogy, it's about family in a lot of ways.
It's the whole Skywalker saga.
Exactly. It's about
the extended family of Han Solo, Chewbacca, Kenobi. Yep. It's all those characters forming a core family. The Rebel Alliance is a family.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And then now when you look at this, I mean, it's like they're reestablishing it,
Yeah. Right. And so going forward, it's going to be he and Grogu will be the core of the family, but you also have all these other ancillary characters like Cara Dune, Grief Karga. All these other characters are going to be part of that large extended family.
Mm-hmm.
The same way Han Solo and Chewie were part of this, like honorary members of the Skywalker family.
And you know what's kind of cool about it is that they haven't made us like oh wow, Grief has nothing to do in this episode. Like you've got all of the characters in there, but two of them aren't doing anything. Like they're just not in the episodes. They're because they're not needed. Until they are. So you don't get burnt out, or it's like they're struggling to give them our heroes some lines of dialogue to feel useful or something like that. I think that that they've done a pretty good job with that.
And to your point, I think Bill Burr's character is going to be part of that extended family as well. I mean,
definitely.
I mean that bond that they had in that episode was very, very powerful in my opinion. Like I really like their dynamic and how they kind of like worked together and kind of covered each other's asses. And then of course at the very end, like I believe he died, and let him escape. I think his character is going to come back in a major way and become part of that extended family.
They did a good job, just like humanizing this guy. Just seemed like your run-of-the-mill villain. It's like when we saw him in the first season.
Correct.
I mean, it's like just give him like a real personality, some actual like ideals. Like when he says like when he has it in for that Imperial soldier, but also that moment when things start going to hell and he hands back to Mando. He says, "I didn't see anything." It's kind of like, yeah, that's a real bro move right there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I was gonna, Bill Burr obviously becoming a core member of the family, but also back to Carl Weathers really quickly. First of all, I'm a huge Rocky fan. The original movies, not the later one. Well, Rocky 6 was good, but Carl Weathers also directed The Siege, which was kind of cool. I didn't even know he was a director. I knew he was an actor and an athlete, but I was like, he directs too. And he did a pretty competent job, except for everyone gives him hell because there's one fleeting shot where you see a crew member standing on the set.
Gene's guy.
I didn't pick up on that. I got to check that out.
Well, you see it now because Disney has fixed it.
Okay. Yeah.
But it was in the original day of streaming. You could, and I never saw it until I went on Twitter, and then I saw it. I was like, oh.
Yeah. Yeah, they've even you could probably find quick clips of it on YouTube. But like people have also they've mocked up like a fake card that says Gene's guy, and it's just like it's just you can see like half of this guy just standing there.
Well, other than Gene's guy, I thought Carl Weathers did a phenomenal job directing that episode too. That episode, the raid on the Imperial stronghold, felt very much like something from their classic trilogy. It had that same kind of energy, like when they boarded the Death Star. It kind of had an exciting vibe to me. Like when they have to go over that cliff and all that, and I just thought, oh wow, this is like classic. The whole show feels like classic Star Wars.
It really does.
It has never happened. I mean, they reference the prequels, but it's almost like that universe doesn't mesh with this universe, because this universe is the grittier, lived-in universe of the original trilogy,
Yeah.
and that's Star Wars.
Yep.
Not to sound too gatekeeperish, but that's the Star Wars I grew up with.
Yeah. That, by the way, that was Bill Barr's character's name's Babe Mayfield.
Mayfield.
But he has a little redemption arc, and I guarantee you we'll see this guy again. And I liked it, by the way, because and we were just discussing this, where they're sitting, where Mando takes off his helmet in order to scan his face so he can get the information on Moff Gideon's ship, but then he gets caught. Like that whole not only is he uncomfortable in that scene, but then now what we see is, after I forget the name of the Imperial officer, Mayfield's former commander, he basically goes up to him and he's like, "Let's have a drink. You guys are the only ones to make it through." And he begins to like have this it's almost like he's like, I hate, like, it just made him hate the Empire more, and that's why he shot him. Like, that was a real tense scene because you can see his emotions just slowly escalating up. You know,
that scene was dope too, because he started reflecting back on his last his last mission under that officer's command, and how many friends and comrades that he lost. He started calling them out on that.
Yeah.
And when he started calling him out on that, I knew, like, oh crap, this is going to escalate in some sort of way, like more so a fight. I didn't necessarily think he was going to, like, shoot him in cold blood right then and there and alert everybody in the base. But that's what made that episode exciting. Like, he got his revenge, took him out, and these guys had to, like, shoot their way out.
Yeah.
And then obviously they've had what was it, Phoenix?
Right.
Min-Na Win's character.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Luckily, like, they were able to, like, climb out the window and have proper backup where she's like a dope sniper and take them out so that they can escape. But that whole scene that you're talking about, like, the uncomfortability of being caught with his mask off and feeling vulnerable, to sitting down at the table and having that conversation of that failed mission, and, like, Mando actually looking into Bill Burr's face and slyly shaking his head no, because he knows, like, he's ready to pop off. Like that was a really dope scene in that episode.
Now I like. Yeah, go on ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say that scene reminded me of something from, like, Inglourious Bastards.
Yes,
those video scenes between, like, the Nazi and the farmer in the beginning, and then later on, he's talking to I can't remember her name, the character's name, but the member of the resistance, and it's all those super tense conversations that Quentin Tarantino does very well. That scene in the mess hall reminded me of one of those. Like, it had, like, that same kind of, like, that, because Bill Burr has that crackly, nervous energy. Like, he's off, because his comedy's like that too. You watch his comedy, he's hilarious in stand-up, by the way. I don't know if you guys ever watch him, but he is so funny. He's not for everyone's taste, because he does, slaughter a lot of sacred cows, but he's hysterical, and he brings that nervous kind of energy, that Boston kind of Boston fighter kind of guy to the and I just love how in that scene, the first time since I introduced the character, we saw his pain as well. When he mentions Operation Cinder on Burnin Khan, the planet, I guess the last mission he had with that superior officer of his, and that really scarred him deeply. You could see it in his eyes. He was haunted by that.
Yeah.
He wasn't just angry like, oh, the Empire screwed me over. He was grieving for the people he lost, the other troopers that he was friends with.
And wasn't it Kara who, after they're on Slave One and he makes that shot, she makes that comment about what did she say? Like, it's a nice shot or something like that.
Yes.
And what does he say in return? He says, like, I just had to get a few things off my chest.
No, he says someone got to sleep at night or something. I can't remember the exact words, but something like, let me see if I can find my blog real quick, because I have the exact quote. He said, because now I'll sleep better or something like that. But it was
something like that. Yeah, if you have the exact quote, yeah.
And he says, if I can find it, he says, almost there.
Oh, big fan, man.
He said we all need to sleep at night.
Yeah,
that's what he said. We all need to sleep at night because that was his something that he couldn't live with. He couldn't reconcile, and I love that. That was great.
It was.
I agree. He has become part of the core family too. Yeah.
Yeah, especially now that he's gotten that weight off of his shoulders that he couldn't live with, and obviously, I mean, despite like the previous bounty hunting or mercenary work he was doing prior, we've seen this in Star Wars a couple times with a couple characters where they once worked for the Empire or were employed by the Empire and realize how much BS the Empire represents and end up going against them and joining the side of like the rebels or joining the side of like whoever is going against the Empire. And I think we're going to see this character become part of the core family and join more missions with Mando and Cara. And so like, yeah, I liked a lot of the characters that were introduced within this season. And of course, like for me who excuse me, for me who enjoys a lot of action and fight sequences, like this had some of the most intense battles and of course awesome fight sequences like this season. And one in particular that we haven't even talked about yet was the fight sequence between Din and Moff Gideon in the rescue. Like when he said, "Oh yeah, we got Grogu's blood. He's no use to us. You can take him back now." And he reaches down, and of course, like Moff Gideon takes a cowardly move and tries to strike him with the Darksaber. But yet again, we see the strength and durability of Beskar, steel. And so that was such a dope fight sequence where he was using the staff that he, acquired, earlier in the season and used that to fight against Moff Gideon. I thought that was an awesome sequence.
Can I throw something out there real quick before we get off the Believer episode?
Yeah.
You guys are more tech savvy than I am. I just have a question. When Mando takes his mask off to log into the Empire's net or whatever it is, first of all, okay, I assume it has facial recognition software to prevent unauthorized use, right? Wouldn't that be to prevent
I know where you're going with this. I really do, because I already thought about this one about 10 times over.
Did that happen?
So
I don't get it.
You would think that it works like that, but that's not what they actually said. And so I'm just kind of writing like in the, like just coloring in the lines here, because the way they described it is how I want to say it works, not comparing it to technology that we literally have today, which they know about probably. I don't know. But what did they say? I think they said something to the effect of like, they need to know, and it was Bill, Mayfield's character, right? He says, like, it needs to scan your face to see if you're like a real person. And I think that was essentially it. And I'm like, yeah,
but that's all the authorization the system needs, a real person.
Yeah, it's not like Demolition Man, where he just cuts his thumb. Anyway,
Maybe
it'll work.
maybe the security is only used to prevent droids from accessing and downloading the data. But as long as you're a human being and they get their physical security right, anyone within the compound can access.
Remember now,
maybe they're checking him against like a known database of rebel collaborators.
Right. So there was that kind of funny sequence before when they're contemplating. They're all sitting there, Boba and the rest of them are sitting there. Like Kara's like, yeah, well, I'm a known. I'm in the database. And then what was Boba's line? He's like, I forgot. It was just hilarious. It's like
Something to the effect of, they all know my face, that
they
kind
all
of
know my face. Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
I have a familiar face
I
or
have a
something.
familiar face. That was it. Yeah, I have a
Yeah.
familiar face.
So evidently, the security system is
Oh,
only. It's like you could be a stranger off the street and you can
pretty
get
much.
access, but if you're wanted, you're toast.
Yeah.
Trilogy, when R2D2 went to the Death Star, now he had, he was able to plug into the Imperial net and all that stuff. Now it figures a droid would be able to bypass, because he's probably got anti-hacking stuff, whatever, or
Mhm.
but not anti-hacking, but hacking stuff. Now, but again, all it has to do is just scan your face, and you can find out where the warlord's ship is. I mean,
Yeah.
that's really lame as far as security. I watched
Well,
that scene. I'm going, okay. My first thought was he's going to take the helmet off, but why? Because
Mhm.
also, if it scans his face, wouldn't his face now be a permanent part of the Imperial network?
you would think you would think so, but I don't think cybersecurity is an important factor in a galaxy far away. That's why they trust people with like briefcases. Like you take this data from point A to point B, or Princess Leia has the fucking data plans, or excuse me, she has the data plans.
Mhm.
But it's funny, like you guys said, like anyone, as long as you're not wanted, any Joe Blow could like come off the street and hack into an Imperial system or acquire some type of like hard drive. Because I mean, even in Rogue One, they just went to that satellite and basically stole the drive from like the sand, I guess the sand, and
But Rogue
ran away
One
with it.
made sense though, because Cassian Andor was a spy. He might have had the Imperial codes at some point, or he might have, there's a little bit of leeway with that because he was a spy. Mando has no, other than fighting them in combat, he has no history with the Empire. He was never a soldier. He was never conscripted into their army. This and that. He was certainly never an officer. So how does, like John says, how does this guy off the street just access the Imperial grid? And it's like, oh, okay, it's cool.
Yeah.
I had a problem with that. I
Well,
won't try.
so and I'll add fuel to your fire, Sebastian, and I'll say that like he's also a part of the guild, and that's a thing in
Yeah,
this.
Yeah,
Like,
like,
like
Guild, right?
yeah, it's like okay, so here's this, and not only is he a part of the guild, he was hired by the Empire. I mean,
that is
wouldn't
true.
that kind of put you on the like, hey, if you see this guy,
Double crossed us on Navarro, yeah. That guy, yeah. So again, it made no sense to me. I'm like, wait a second. I mean, but anyway, okay, I digress because it'll be the whole podcast if I keep belaboring this point. All right, I'm done. Sorry.
So I wanted to talk about like a little bit about Boba Fett. I mean, we kind of already have talked about him, but evidently, at the end of this episode, we got like
Oh my
what
goodness.
seems to be a segue into a new series, the Book of Boba Fett or something like that. Is that what it's called?
Yep.
The book of Boba Fett. That was so awesome, dude. Because like once they queued up that sequence, I was like, oh, there goes Jabba's advisor from Return of the Jedi. Now
Big Fortuna.
he's
Fortuna.
he's the fat ruler. Where are they going with this? And sure
Oh man,
enough,
does that throne make everyone fat? Is that just Boba? Next time we see
No.
Boba, seems like 50 pounds
So-
overweight now.
I'm gonna
So
stay
that
away from the throne. That's all I can say.
that throne, it's interesting. That throne, I did see somebody. Okay, so there's evidently just like when I don't know why Boba had to do this. By the way, we get a lot of, and to go back to Sebastian's point, we get a lot more like development on Boba Fett himself in
Yeah.
just this season anyway. There's that part where he's showing how the armor belonged to his father, and he's basically showing like his what do you call it? His right to wear the armor. Okay, but it's written in that language is Mandalore. Evidently, that language is also written on the thing that Bib Fortuna is sitting at in Jabba's X-Palace.
I didn't realize that.
Hmm.
Then they translated it, and there's text that goes along the edge there, and it says Boba Fett, or at least they believe it says Boba, and then so
Really?
there's something to it. Yeah, there's something to it. I'm not the guy who reads like this language, so I don't know. But there's people out there that are way more, I guess they're way more into it. I also don't speak Klingon, or write it for that matter. Maybe I know a few phrases, but still, so there's something to it there. And by the way, there is this, I think it was in the last episode. Two real quick things. Number one, I do like the paint job. I'm just gonna say I think it looks different, but it's clean, and we really haven't seen it on his armor. Right? Exactly.
Yeah.
Number two, I really like that sequence where they're talking in Slave One, and it rotates, and you can see the ship rotating through the window.
Cool. Yeah, I like that.
Because it kind of answered a question for me. It's like, okay, so it's got like a gyroscopic kind of a thing going on where it levels itself out so that the pilot can see, versus landing versus taking off, which is kind of like, oh, that's neat. But you never saw that really before. So
that scene kind of reminded me of 2001: Space Odyssey, where you see the two astronauts, Bowman and Poole, walking down a rotating corridor into what appears to be a stationary cockpit. And then once they're inside of that, the cockpit looks like it's rotating. It's like this weird little camera trick they do by locking off the camera. But that's what that scene kind of had like a tiny vibe of for me, was that 2001 kind of thing where they sort of play with your brain and like mess with space a little bit, I don't know. Again, one more thing. Speaking of Boba Fett, I got to cover that. Did anyone else think it was kind of cool when he put on his armor and it didn't quite fit the way it used to?
Yeah.
As a middle-aged guy myself, I just think that was kind of a nice nod. Like, yes, we all get older, even Boba Fett.
Doesn't affect his fighting style, evidently, and that was one thing that I brought up before. Like, when he's fighting all those stormtroopers in the tragedy, that's the episode where we see him, right? And before he even gets his armor, he's just destroying stormtroopers left and right.
Oh yeah.
Holy cow.
Going down like chumps.
Just to let you know, he doesn't necessarily need that armor to kick ass. So
no. Just adds to it.
Yeah. Now, as for what we'll see there, and I kind of like I'm talking about the throne scene or whatever you want to call it, in Jabba's palace. My first reaction was like, why are we here? Oh, okay. Evidently, he's taking something that he feels is his. He's reclaiming it. But and it is definitely the segue into the new series, I'm sure.
Should we call him? Huh? Should we call him Boba the Hutt then?
No, because he's not a Hutt. I don't think so. Anyway, with this,
it sounds like a drink, if you think about it.
Yeah, it does. Pizza the Hutt. Not a drink. So yeah, I think that yeah. Well, does that mean that? Because I got this real impression. I think we kind of discussed this before, where Boba Fett was. It's like we've never heard so much exposition out of it. But evidently, if you're a Mandalorian of some type, well, I guess at least with Bando, he was willing to explain it to him or talk to him about it. I almost felt like he had like this code of honor thing, which is something like, we talked about this before, Jason. Like before this season and before we saw this Boba Fett, my idea of Boba Fett was gangster.
Yeah.
Coming back at the end of this series, I kind of get that feeling again. I don't know.
No, that's spot on.
It certainly seems that way.
So you're getting more of that vibe again that Boba Fett is a gangster.
Yeah. Well, there were some things that were established. Number one, Bo-Katan has zero respect. Essentially zero respect for him as a Mandalorian. So he's not going back there. Number two, Boba Fett has already said he doesn't care. he is a Mandalorian by heritage, not because he wants to go. He clearly says it in this episode about Mandalore. He's like, that the Imperials turned it to glass. It's like it's worthless. Don't even bother. Like, I don't care. So he's on his own track, evidently. I
love the scene in The Believer where he meets Bo-Katan in the bar. And they start getting a little testy. He's all, easy, princess.
Yeah, I love that part. It was really
snarky. Like,
Yeah.
but Bo-Katan represents government, and like you guys were saying, Boba Fett's a gangster.
Mm-hmm.
He has no place in that role. He has but apparently he can play nice and work with him when he has to. But they don't see eye to eye and they never will. But I like this idea of this new miniseries. That's what I heard is going to be. They call it a quote unquote event series. I don't think it's going to be a full time show like Mandalorian. It's just going to be an event series. But I like this idea of maybe Star Wars establishing its own Godfather saga with Boba Fett being like some kind of a Michael or Don Corleone or Michael Corleone.
Mm-hmm.
I love that because Jabba the Hutt kind of has like Godfather influences. Like he has those little Venetian blinds behind the throne. That's straight from Godfather. Godfather's office is like full of Venetian blinds, and just little thing. I mean, and obviously Francis Ford Coppola went. He is the guy that George Lucas partnered with early in his career, and kind of gave George Lucas the career by giving there's directing gigs and all that. So I think the saga coming full circle, not just being a western and a martial arts cinema type thing, but also that little bit of Godfather thrown in as well, and that's the avenue that they can explore with this Boba Fett, or the book of what's it called, the Book of Boba Fett, or
Yeah, I think it's like the Book of Boba or the Book of Boba Fett.
It's the Book of Boba Fett.
Yep.
Book of Boba sounds a little weird. I like Book of Boba Fett. It sounds
Me too. Me too.
Book of Boba sounds,
sounds like a recipe for boba drinks.
Yeah.
But you bring up a good point because I've often said this in this podcast and to many other people. Like a lot of people crap on Solo, but I actually found Solo to be like a fun movie, and I liked how it explored the underworld and gangster part of Star Wars, and I would like to see more of that. And even though he's like dead around this time period, Darth Maul was involved in the seedy underworld gangster life within the Star Wars universe.
Yep.
And so to your point, Sebastian, I would like to see them kind of explore that a little bit more, almost like how Mandalorian in itself is kind of like, when it first started out, it was kind of like away from the vibe of like Jedi temples and the politics within Star Wars, things like that. It gave us that Western wolf and cub kind of vibe, within this series. And I like to see more of those sides of like Star Wars being explored. And that's one thing I love and appreciate about Disney Plus. Like Disney Plus is allowing the company and these creators to have a platform to tell these type of stories. And from their last press conference, aside from the Marvel projects and the Disney projects, we got a plethora of Star Wars announcements with the Book of Boba Fett, the Ahsoka Tano series. I know they've been talking about the Obi-Wan series forever, but sounds like it's coming. Sounds like a little more serious now. Rogue Squadron. I mean, there's so many.
That's going to be a movie.
Oh, is that going to be a movie?
Yeah.
I'm excited for the new Lando Calrissian miniseries because the first thing I said after Jules and I saw Solo in theaters, walking out to the car, and I said, they got to make a Lando movie. Because Glover was so good in that role. I mean,
Donald Glover was perfect for that role.
He doesn't look anything like Billy D. Williams, but he captured the persona so well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even little things he did with his voice to kind of have a little bit of that Billy D. sort of. But I mean, again, he was. I just saw it. And I think the charisma that he had in that role leapt off the screen. Whenever he was on screen, everybody else was like off screen because he was that good. And I said, okay, they got to make a Lando movie. But then Solo underperformed so badly at the box office, and I thought, oh well, it's not going to happen. Now that Disney Plus has opened this whole new streaming, bonanza of this cornucopia of Star Wars, they're going to do the Lando project. It's going to be a limited series, I understand. But,
and even though they haven't announced who's going to be in it, I mean, if they get Mark Hamill to come back, then getting Donald Glover to actually reprise his role as Lando, that actually seems plausible. parts, like as we're talking about a Lando series.
Well, but the weird thing is though, if you had Mark Hamill looking the way he does in post Return of the Jedi, wouldn't Lando have to look that way too? He would have to be Billy D. Williams again, or de-aged Billy D. Williams. I'd rather see it be Donald Glover, like earlier, like maybe 10 years before New Hope, because we never saw how he got Cloud City. All Han Solo says that he conned somebody out of it. Well, look, that could be a story. That could be a whole, that could be a whole thing. I mean, maybe the con went really bad, and who knows what happened.
Well, I'd like to say that it's their chance to really draw people back into. And by the way, I took Jason. We were up at Fanime, and I was like, "Let's go see it." We took an Uber to go to a theater because they don't have the theater in downtown San Jose anymore. We had to go it was something like 10 miles away or something like that just to see the movie, and it was like, but
still worth it though.
Oh yeah, I agree. I think that that if they play their cards right, they could actually kind of, and I think they've been doing this honestly, is they kind of fold in pieces of the movies and to the television series to kind of like make the story a little bit more complete, and I think it can work. I really do, and I would definitely watch that show, by the way.
Because you know how have you ever heard it being said that the Clone Wars television series fixed the prequel trilogy? Have you ever heard that comment?
I've heard it.
I've heard that sentiment.
Yes, I have.
Yeah, and so would you think that with the new content coming out, this could, I mean, to some fans who feel this way about the sequel trilogy, could these new projects in effect fix the sequel trilogy?
Well, and so here's the thing. I'm just my opinion on this. That is, there's a lot of. It's sort of like the last. What was it? The middle movie of the sequel trilogy.
Last Jedi.
The Last Jedi and the Rise of Skywalker. And I always said that like the Rise of Skywalker has to be a box of Band-Aids for the previous movie.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why is because there's things in it that just kind of didn't make sense, and then there's things that happened in the next movie that kind of didn't make sense, but I don't think when they produce these things, they're actually thinking a lot terribly about like, okay, let's try to fix this. I think that there's like, let's build on it, and maybe people will watch this, and then if they go back to look at it, there'll be an explanation for it. But as terms of, and what we're really talking about is like continuity a little bit here, and like retconning things, right? Maybe they will do that kind of a thing. But the Mandalorian's already proven to us if the story's good enough, maybe you won't care. I mean, maybe and there are people that sit there and connect the dots when it comes to continuity. But if the stories are good enough, does it need it?
Not really. And the continuity has been rewritten so many times with the Star Wars universe. The expanded universe has been changed since Disney took over. It's been deleted more or less from the old, so that kind of stuff doesn't really make me lose sleep at night.
Right.
But what I like, and I was speaking to Myron's point earlier, is that I think these all this new content could definitely kind of fill in the cracks of the sequel trilogy and maybe give more. Again, we've already seen that starting with the clone attempts, in Mandalorian, that would eventually lead to Snoke and or the Emperor. They're mining Baby Yoda from midichlorians to make those clones, which were largely unsuccessful, meaning that there's again more to it than midichlorians. We already discussed that. But again, I think if this new expanded content has the possibility of filling in a lot of those cracks. Now, the original part of the problem with the sequel trilogy is that people say, and this is a valid point, it's very haphazard. From one movie to the next, there's no real feeling of a plan. It's just like, this is going to happen. Oh, but this will happen. And then
there was no plan.
There was no plan. And then John said the Rise of Skywalker, that was perfect, by the way, a box of Band-Aids for the whole thing. And that's what I felt. I think Rise of Skywalker had the hardest job because it had to tie all that plus the 9 films of the Skywalker saga. But here's the thing. The original trilogy was just like that in a way. It really was. I mean, because the whole you go from New Hope to Empire, it's kind of smooth, but then you go from Empire to Return of the Jedi, and there's problems. They have a second Death Star. I mean, it took them 20 years to build the first one, and they have the second one almost ready. But I mean, come on, I mean, there's clearly that Lucas, he already used that climax at the end of New Hope, and he painted himself into a corner for Return of the Jedi. He had no other climax. He had to build another Death Star. So I would argue the original trilogy was just as haphazard, but they were better at covering it because there was better storytelling. The sequel trilogy, as much as they tried, the sequel trilogy had some good characters. I love Rey. I love Finn. Poe Dameron, yeah, he's all right. Needs work, I think, but he's okay. But the characters are solid, but the storytelling just wasn't as solid as original trilogy. They couldn't cover the holes quite as well. But this new expanded stuff has the opportunity to go back and fix a lot of that, fix something that work.
And that's how I feel about the Clone Wars television series with Episode 2. I mean, I consider Episode 2 like the weakest of the prequel trilogy, but I think Clone Wars the series kind of expanded upon the story to kind of give me some at least type of newfound appreciation for it. But still, when you go back and watch it, it's kind of like it's kind of an eyesore for me. But still, I feel like with some of this expanded content, it really does kind of fill in the cracks and fill in the storylines to where like you go back and look at those films and it kind of fills in the gaps or fills in the holes to where like it gives you a newfound perspective and appreciation for that work. And so like as much as it's griped about how the prequel or the sequel trilogy ruined Star Wars and ruined the Skywalker saga, I mean there's still like a 30-year gap in time of storytelling between Return of the Jedi and the Force Awakens to kind of like tell stories. And to John's point, like it doesn't necessarily have to be projects to focus on that. It just tell a story on its own and be its own thing. But then in being its own thing, it could still like give us that background or give us that context into like, oh, this is where they were going during this is where this situation was going in this particular point in time, which explains what happened in this film or where the direction was going in this film, things like that. So
yeah, I tend to agree with that, and Sebastian made some good points as well earlier on that. I wanted to kind of wrap up this discussion a little bit here with the Mandalorian season 2 here, just by saying that but what do you? I think everyone unanimously. I think that the series overall was pretty good. There were some filler episodes. Let's just call them that. Just kind of. Well, I got the impression in more than one, and I could say that the one that we were talking about, I think the Believer, where actually has some good content for being a filler. But then we also had the Passenger with the Frog Lady, and I would say, and then and I think Myron, you probably mentioned this before, but it's like a Monster of the Week episode.
Yeah, I mean, I stick with my stance on this. Season 2 was super dope, and I loved it. Episode 2 of this season was the weakest one.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. Now the thing is, there may have been episodes of Mandalorian that I liked less than others. That was the only episode of the entire series I actively hated.
Me too.
It was awful, and the whole thing with him eating the eggs, the Baby Yoda. It's like, why are you trying to make your the best character in the show, arguably, so awful? I mean, he's basically stealing
because he's a kid. I mean, it's like kids are gonna do like dumb, stupid things like that.
He's stealing this woman's future. Those are her eggs. I'm like, you're eating her future children. That's horrible. And it kind of wanted to be. It felt like it wanted to be a horror comedy like Gremlins. But I'm one of the 10 people on the planet that I can't stand Gremlins. I saw it back in high school, absolutely hated it. And I watched that and I thought, oh God, they're going for the horror comedy vibe. Horror, I love horror. I love comedy. I don't love horror comedy. I don't want peanut butter in my chocolate. I like it just like keep them nice and separate. They work. The horror comedy genre is very hit and miss for me. And that episode, The Passenger, just fell flat.
It to me, my biggest problem with it is just that it didn't have any substance to it. Like it offered nothing.
I don't know. I think those eggs are pretty filling. But bumps.
So, and with this, by the way, I thought it was cool that they based the ice spiders or whatever you want to call them, on some of the original concept art for a creature that would have been on Hoth, I assume.
It was Dagobah, and then they made.
Okay.
That's where they were supposed to appear, but the what's his name, Douglas Chang, one of the production designers on Mandalorian. He also worked in the prequel trilogy, but he said that he saw Ralph Corey's sketches and he thought those creatures with their kind of bluish appearance looked like something you'd see on an ice planet, so he transposed them to this glacial planet. But the spiders, that reminded me more of something from like a bad Indiana Jones movie.
Yeah.
Like, we got ice spiders, and they're all over the ship, I was getting so bored. I was like, are we going to approach a story at any point, or is this just going to be chase, Baby Yoda eat something he shouldn't have, chase?
And that was my issue with the season being so short, and we've only have 8 episodes within the season. We need to progress the story, and I felt like this was a missed opportunity. Like had the season finale kind of ended differently. I mean, I really can't think of an example yet, but I'm just saying, like, had this season ended differently and not the way it did, I might have been a little bit more like judgmental. Like, see, it could have been better if you had not wasted, an opportunity with episode 2. And so, that was kind of like my big gripe about like this season was that particular episode. Everything else, like, I felt like progressed the story, a little bit more, or even monumentally more. This did nothing to add to the progression, and that's why I was upset. Like, oh, this was a waste.
A funny thing is, I mean, I'm an older guy. I'm in my 50s, and I grew up in the era where TV seasons were like 30 episodes, 25 episodes.
Yep.
People say, do you miss the longer seasons? Here's the short answer. No, I don't. Because I find that shorter seasons are much more focused. And I like the idea of these arcs that you can just kind of like, you can stay in a groove. It doesn't always work. I think, like, for example, Star Trek Discovery has some issues its first couple seasons. It's a much better show this year, by the way. If you guys aren't watching it, it has come leaps and bounds from where it was. But anyway, back to Mandalorian. Also the first one, The Marshal was like an hour long, which was longer than usual. It was like an hour. That's like an hour and change, I think it was. But here's the problem: it was basically a monster story. I mean, it was like an hour long monster story. Other than getting Boba Fett's armor back, there was a whole lot of nothing there. And it was, you got a little bit of a deeper look at the Sand People culture, which was kind of nice. And you had like the opening scene, which recreated like a 1930s or 40s boxing club from like Chicago or New York or something. And I kind of like that vibe it was trying to shoot for. That was all good and well. John Leguizamo playing the alien in that scene, the guy that Mando was sent to talk with. That was kind of neat. I didn't expect that. But other than that, episode was a whole lot of nothing. And I was like, okay, it wasn't the best way they could have opened the season, but it wasn't so bad. The Passenger, though, I actively hated. Baby Yoda eating everything and just getting in trouble, and then the giant, big damn spiders. It reminded me of Indiana Jones with the ants. We got big damn ants.
Yeah,
that's what it was. It was Indiana Jones and the big damn ants.
It provided like even with the Razor Crest damaged, by the ice spiders or whatever you want to call those things, it's like a prominent problem that's essentially remedied in the next episode. I mean, there's zero to it.
Yeah.
um I mean, I won't talk about the final fate of the Razor Crest yet.
Ooh.
uh, but you have a good point about that, and I wanted to kind of bring that up as well as like, there are tons of Easter eggs in here, but the other criticism is like, and you even mentioned it, and I tend to agree with it. There's fan service in here as well. Now, I don't necessarily hate fan service, but it tends to be laid on a little thick sometimes. In fact, in this episode, the one you're talking about, the Marshal, what are the two things? Number one, we see Boba Fett's armor. Number two, we see that sand people have a culture, and we understand them a little bit more. There's not much else outside of that, and outside of the monster of the week whole thing. Oh, you figure out there's another Moss on that there's this other Moss on Tatooine that you probably haven't heard of, or if you've heard of it, you heard of it once. But there's not much to it, right?
No, it's a monster story. It's a simple It's a typical Mandalorian story where he has to go to a town, rid them of a monster in exchange for blank, and then he leaves.
Mhm.
And but they dragged it out to an hour. It was a little bit long for kind of a nothing story. So I was a little disappointed by it, but I didn't actively hate it. I was just like,
Right.
it was so-so.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to see some more Mandalorian. That pretty much gave me what I wanted to see. But yeah, I don't think it was over an hour. I think it was like 50 minutes. It's like a classic Trek episode. It's pretty. But if you add commercials, like, okay, if we were talking about like broadcast TV, yeah, that's an hour and a half easy, right?
Yeah.
So but yeah, I would say the stinker is, the passenger. I just didn't see. It's like,
Passenger was the worst of the series.
yeah,
Worst of the series. I would go that far.
yeah,
That's the
no,
worst.
you're right. Worst of the series. I can't. Season one didn't have that.
I
So
was really shocked to see that John Favreau wrote that one.
yeah, do you think that there's too much fan service in it? Because some people have mentioned this.
In The Passenger?
No. In the second season of The Mandalorian total.
No, not really, because it
No.
it has to tie into the greater Star Wars universe eventually, right? I mean, well, we're all kind of waiting for that. I mean, but like we were saying earlier, all of us were saying that the way they tie in the fan service, you don't have to have 100 years of Star Wars under your belt.
Bingo.
My friend Nick, his wife, has no Star Wars context whatsoever. Never seen the movies, never seen any of the cartoons. She loves The Mandalorian because she watches it for what it is. I have a German friend, Alex. Same thing. Never watched a lick of Star Wars in his life. He started watching because he saw the Baby Yoda memes and gifs, and he fell in love with that. And he started watching the show, and he loves the show. And now he wants to watch more Star Wars because of the show. So the fan service is done in such a way that it makes you curious, but you don't have to have like vast Star Wars knowledge. If you do, you might get a little bit more resonance from it, but you won't be lost.
Yep.
I think
Totally
that's
agree.
you
Oh, I
know?
totally agree with it. It's accessible, and I mentioned that earlier, right? It's
Yeah,
accessible if you just know a little bit about Star Wars.
or
If
nothing.
if you know nothing of Star Wars, it's accessible because of the way that the story is told. However, if you are a fan of Star Wars, all those Easter eggs and the quote unquote fan service, it just kind of makes you go, "Ooh, isn't that cool?" That's how I felt about it. I don't know about
Right.
you guys, so
No, I feel the same way. I guess.
yeah.
And
Yep. Yeah, pretty much enjoyed it. So on that level.
Yeah.
So yeah, you gonna say something, Myron?
Oh no.
Yeah. All right, cool. So last thoughts. Anything else that we wanted to comment on this before we wrap it up?
Like again, overall, I'm very hyped on this series. This is one of the, I was gonna order Disney Plus anyway because I'm a big Disney nut. But I mean, of course, like anybody, I think this was a big selling point as far as like original programming goes.
Yes.
For the platform, and so far it's been delivering, and I'm excited to see the upcoming projects they have coming out, I think Mandalorian, again, as I mentioned before, has proven that it 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 is true to Star Wars, and I have to thank Dave Filoni and John Favreau on that. I'm really excited to be a Star Wars fan again, and I've always been a Star Wars fan. I collect a lot of the you know memorabilia, figures, all that kind of stuff. But I was kind of let down by the Last Jedi and uh, um, Rise of Skywalker. I mean, I watched them in theaters and was entertained for what it was, but at the same time, it's like I feel like it dropped the ball on what it could have been with such a great cast of characters and actors that they've got for these roles. Like the ball was dropped, and I feel from that mishap, like the new stuff that we're getting is what we want. And Mandalorian so far to me has shown that it's realizing what we want as Star Wars fans, old and young, and it's been delivering a great source of stories and entertainment for everybody. So sucks that we got to wait. I think I read that the season 3 premiere is going to be December 2021. So
That's Book of Boba Fett.
But yeah, that is true. But Mandalorian as well. It's not coming out around the same time frame as it's going to be a little later because I think they're shooting season 3 and season 4 simultaneously. So we got to wait like a little longer. But I'm excited to see like the next iteration, like the next season.
Yeah, same here. I mean, like I think this season, just like the first, did a good job of doing a lot of things right and not a lot of things wrong. Really, I mean, yeah, it's like I thought the it's like the passenger was just kind of filler, but I don't know. It's like for me, it's like I didn't have the actual like actively hate like part of it that you guys did. I mean, it's like hey, it's like I mean, anything like where Baby Yoda's doing something actively horrible, like eating the eggs and just being like a terrible little kid. It's like that was cute. I like that. It was hilarious. But overall, it's like I mean, I think it did a good job, just like like what just like setting out like developing Mendo's character more, working in like as we've been saying, like working in stuff in the wider Star Wars universe, like in a fairly seamless fashion. It's like and even if they are going to like write out Baby Yoda for maybe a little while, it's like I don't know. It's like I'm honestly fine with just seeing what Mando gets up to. It's like, hey, if they want to do season 3 is all about the retaking of Mandalore, then I like to see that. I still think it's gonna be interesting to see what's gonna happen when like how Mando and Bo-Katan are gonna settle that whole like dark saber issue because it's just funny to see like the whole fundamentalism thing get flipped on its head because she was giving him crap for it and now it's like she's the one who's bound by it and he's just kind of like no, I don't want anything to do with this.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it's something that's got some good plot threads to set out for season 3, like whatever form it takes, whenever it happens, which will likely be after the like the week after Book of Boba Fett's done, Mandalorian season 3. In fact, it seems like with all that Disney's these shows, Star Wars shows that Disney's announced, it's like they just want like a year-round thing of Star Wars TV shows. Like you just keep you watching week after week, and hey, it's like if the way things have been going on The Mandalorian, it's like I can at least say that that actually doesn't sound like a bad thing right now.
To Jason's point, I'm sorry. Just have one quick thing to add to Jason's point. You mentioned that you could see a further exploration of him taking or her Bo-Katan getting the black saber back from Mando. I hope they wrap that up in 5 minutes because that can be such a non-drama. It's such an artificial drama,
It's like it'll either be like like the entire plot of season 3, or they'll settle it within the first episode.
I
the first 5 minutes, or just make the whole episode about it.
I was going to comment on that and just say, you know what? The conversation pretty much goes like this. Din goes, okay, well, let me try this again. You sure you don't want this? And she just goes, yeah, I'll take it. And then that's it.
I don't know my resolution. She just goes, "Oh, all right," and just takes it.
Yeah, we couldn't do it. We couldn't do in front of Moff Gideon, but now that we're in our ship, like, yeah, give me that saber.
She hems and haws for about 5 seconds, and then goes, "Okay."
Vanda's like, I'm gonna leave the dark saber right here, and I'm gonna walk away from it.
Yeah.
She just gives him like a slow punch, and he just falls to the ground like, oh, falls out of his hand, just goes yoink. All right, settled.
Done.
Yeah, right. You took it, boy. You're really slick. You got it from really quickly. No, I would love to see that resolved in 5 minutes and then just move on to something more interesting. And retaking Mandalore, yeah, that could be good for one episode. I don't want to see a whole season of it because the core of the show is Mando and Baby Yoda. I could see a few episodes. I could see 3 episodes without Baby Yoda, but not too much longer because that's getting away from what makes the show attractive for a lot of people. I know my friend Alex has sworn that if they get rid of Baby Yoda, he will probably stop watching because that's how invested he is in that character. So Baby Yoda. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Myron.
No, I'm saying I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people in the same boat as well.
Yeah. Oh yes, yeah. I mean, Baby Yoda has created this explosion, this pop culture explosion I have not seen in a long time over a single character. I mean, people that know nothing about Star Wars are suddenly being attracted to it because of that character's like hyper cuteness.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't just get rid of that or put it away in a closet. It's for a few episodes maybe if the episodes are compelling enough. Yeah. But for the whole season, no, they got to bring him back.
And outside of the incredible meme and popularity of this little creature, they've already built up this relationship. So it's an integral part of the story. So I don't see it going away.
So everyone, go back and check The Last Jedi. It's like those scenes of Luke's it's like Jedi training compound. Just make sure there aren't any green ears sticking out of the rubble there. Just saying.
Point, I was going to say merchandising.
Yogurt was right.
There's Mandalorian season 3, the search for more money.
Exactly. There's Baby Yoda stuff everywhere now. I mean, you go to any Target or any store anywhere, and there's Baby Yoda, whatever. And you can't put the genie back in the bottle like that. So yeah.
And it's funny that you mentioned that, Sebastian, and also mention about your friends too, because you remember back, way back in the 80s, back when it was nerdy to be a Star Wars fan,
it was.
Why spend money on all this Star Wars products when you could buy the newest hottest fashion or whatever? It's because we're passionate fans. And you fast forward to now it's fun, or now it's cool to be a Star Wars fan, because to John's point too, it's more accessible, and there's characters in a lot of these shows or brands that people are relating to. I mean, the same could be said on the Marvel side of things too. It was nerdy to collect comic books and do all that stuff, but I think kids growing up in the late 80s, early 90s, being exposed to a lot of that material, then of course now it's way more accessible. It's fun, and obviously they got Mickey Mouse's money to back them up to kind of I don't want to say shove this down your throat, but basically put it in front of your face. I mean, like you said, you can probably talk to any grandmother oh yeah, I love the Baby Yoda because he's so hyper cute and so accessible. Obviously they want to delve into it, and you take that fraction out of the equation, you might have a lot of people drop off Mandalorian I just watched it for the puppet.
I agree. Mm-hmm. You're risking your franchise's life by doing that. But at the same time, the biggest thing I was telling Jules and I were talking about this, and Mandalorian proved one thing to me that I honestly didn't know if it was possible or not, was doing Star Wars as a live action TV show. My first thought was, oh my God, it'd be way too expensive to do something that can compete with the movies. I mean, but now they've pioneered all this new technology with the wraparound LED screens to do all these different backgrounds. And they're so photo convincing that I honestly can't tell when they're shooting location versus when they're on the soundstage anymore. The soundstage looks so good with the wraparound LED. The lighting is an exact match for outdoors.
Yes,
And technology caught up, so now they can do this.
You're right, and it's also because of Disney dollars.
Well, and digital effects have come down. They're not doing. They do have some practical models on the show. I understand that Moff Gideon's ship, as well as that was a practical model. The launch tubes and all. I know Mando's ship was based on a practical model, but it's rendered in CGI because of all the flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
But Moff Gideon's ship, I believe, according to the Mandalorian Gallery series, I don't know if you guys watch those. The making of Mandalorian series they have on Disney Plus called Gallery.
I haven't watched that yet. I know what you're talking about, though.
Well, the first episode is already up for streaming, and it showed Moff Gideon's cruiser. It's shot as a practical model. Nice. Like using LED lights for the engines and all that stuff. And I thought, wow, that amazed me because, you think with CGI effects being so much cheaper nowadays and so much easier to render. But no, they went old school on that. You have to admire that a lot of the makeups are practical with very little CGI augmentation. A lot of the creatures are practical, but that's what amazed me, that this show proves that with enough money behind it, you could do Star Wars as a viable live-action TV show, something I would have never thought 10 years ago.
Agree.
Sebastian, you bring a really good point because I remember a Star Wars television show is not like a new idea that Lucasfilm has had. They've actually toyed with this idea for I think 20 years, at least maybe 30. Because I remember hearing talk about this in the 80s. And then in my head, I'm going I was thinking of that Ewoks thing that they did. And I know, and I'm not gonna I don't even, can you see that on Disney Plus? Anyway,
no.
I don't think so. No. But I think of things like that. And, back then I was like, how could you do this? I got the answer now. This is it. This is actually this hits all the notes, and it's something I couldn't really have imagined, but it's there and it works very well.
Yes.
I remember 20 years ago, we were at Comic-Con, 2004 Comic-Con, not 20 years ago. And we sat on the big Star Wars panel they had in Hall H, and Steve Sansweet, the Lucasfilm, at the time he was Lucasfilm's PR guy, he went on and he announced the development of a live-action Star Wars TV show. This is back before the prequel trilogy is even finished. And the crowd went nuts. People were like, oh, but I remember when we were leaving Hall H, Jules and I were talking about, a live action show. And I kept thinking, yeah, but do you think the technology's there for that yet, for TV? Because TV and movies back, even as far back as the early 2000s, were very different animals.
Yes.
Battlestar Galactica, for example, brought them a little bit closer. Or Firefly, too, had some great production value on a relatively small budget. They kind of bridged that gap a little bit, but still, they were very separate entities. Now the line is so blurred. You look at any number of Netflix shows. Hell, even Star Trek Discovery looks more cinematic than the last couple of movies did. So you have the production value for TV. It's totally on a par with feature films nowadays. You cannot differentiate. They're even shot in 2.351 ratios, and their movies and TV are pretty much the same thing now.
Well, and I know that we talked about this before, Sebastian, but the Battlestar Galactica reboot series that played on Sci-Fi, they were talking about how they were running out of money to make the thing. It was a huge issue, and that they were really kind of struggling to finish it. And then there was times where it would be oh, there's a sprint in effects and everything else, and then you would just kind of have these real kind of, and not bad episodes. They're just they're just interpersonal communications kind of episode, and it was really kind of more chalked up to we didn't have a lot of budget, and it was difficult for them to do it. And this is in the early 2000s, right? Mm-hmm. So 2004-ish or something like that, I want to say.
Yeah.
and it was difficult for them to pull that off at that point, although it was a little bit, they were able to get some things accomplished.
Yeah.
I believe Ron Moore had even said, he was like, yeah, we really we're going to finish this thing. But now the production values, the technology has really caught up. I'm actually I'm going to watch that thing because that kind of intrigues me, that they're using some some filming models for some of the ships. I actually like that idea. But it's kind of amazing that they can produce something at this quality, and I think that it's that with the with streaming services now starting to really ramp up, and there's more acceptance of it now than maybe it was like even 5 years ago. That we're probably in for some really good stuff, production wise. So yeah, it's amazing.
Well, I also think too, like we're starting to see this shift in like preference in entertainment and viewership because for the longest time, like movies were like the big budget box box office blockbuster to see, but now we're seeing like all these studios and companies releasing their own streaming apps and coming up with that original material to make their app or their streaming service that much more appealing, that much more better. And we're starting to see like, Hollywood blockbuster, actors start to do more television series. Like I can't remember what series it was, but I remember Halle Berry being in a television series. Like people that you kind of associate as being Hollywood movie actors now doing television shows or television series. Like I think that shift in entertainment preference is definitely here now, especially with all these streaming services. Thus, they're going to be putting more money, more resources behind making these shows great and fantastic. And to Sebastian's point, like if you go back and watch um the prequel trilogy on a 4K television, it just looks so weird, dude. Like too synthetic, and having that mix of practical effects and how much better like our technology has gotten to where they could recreate scenes and build graphics to like in 4K or 8K, like just the resolution and the look and the feel and everything is just that much more realistic to where they could take us to these worlds without having us go see it in the theater, because prior, those were the projects getting the major $1 million budgets to have those type of effects were films
or filming locations too, by the way.
There's that.
Yep, filming locations.
Point real quick, if I could.
Yeah.
Myron brought up the point of seeing it in a 4K. My wife and I we have a 4K system, but we bought ourselves a digital projector over the summer because I was missing movies like Something Fierce. So we bought a digital projector. It supports 1080p, but it's more like 720p. And we got this large pull-out screen. It goes like 6 feet or plus. And we've been watching Mandalorian that way every week since season 2 started. And I tell you, it plays very cinematically. After each episode, I feel like I just come home from the movies. It is that powerful and that good. And this is not even full 4K resolution. This is like
well, your 720p is what you said, right?
Well, it supports 1080p, but it's more like 720p.
Yeah, okay.
But I mean, it looks great. I mean, the point is the show has a power of a cinematic presentation, and that's the thing is that the visuals, they have a very theatrical feel to them. They don't feel like television used to have kind of a locked off cameras, or even like Galactica had like the shaky cam because it tried to cover up creakiness in the budget and things like that. But this show has no compromises. Yeah. This show is as good as anything you can make for a movie. That's what amazes me.
It's funny you say that because the Battlestar Galactica series I just referenced, they talked about like using the shaky cam technique to kind of cover a multitude of sins when it
Sure.
came to the CG processing because it kind of draws your eyes off focus a little bit. But
Yeah.
I understand exactly what you're saying. What you're saying is that the production of it is like that. It is cinematic rather and rather than just being like your static 1-2 shots or anything like that. Some of these things that you normally just associate with watching in a television show. So they've kind of gone beyond that, and it's easier, with some of the digital processing they're able to do.
Very much.
So yeah, that's a pretty cool observation. And, now you're making me consider getting a giant projector screen.
They are so worth it. It has saved our summer this year. I mean, like not going to
Mhm.
movies. I won't say
Yeah.
why.
But it's a good observation to make, because it may not have been obvious, directly obvious, just from watching it on TV. But I can tell the production values for the show are really, really pretty good.
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah.
and that would just kind of add to the whole atmosphere to it. Just pop up, get up the popcorn or whatever.
Oh,
If you eat popcorn.
it's
So
like a movie. It plays like a movie.
yeah.
Anyway.
Yep. All right. So I guess that's about all we really have, and I appreciate all of you guys joining this stream, and we'll be doing more of these. Well, we won't be on, like the next time a Mandalorian is, but maybe we'll, if it's in like almost a year from now, who knows? But there'll be some other things for us to talk about, So, hey, thanks for joining us, Sebastian. It's good to have you on.
My pleasure.
Um, and Jason and Myron, of course.
Always a pleasure.
All right.
Yep, good times, man.
All right. We'll talk to you all later.
All right. Bye-bye.